How good it is to be here. We're looking forward tomorrow to a day of great celebration, of great joy. Looking beyond the Easter lilies, as beautiful as they may be, looking beyond the Easter eggs, as fun as they might be, looking beyond the Easter bunnies, as cute as they may be, to something that means everything in our lives, the resurrection of the one who said, I am the resurrection, I am the life. The day of the empty tomb. What a wonderful day. But I'd like to turn our attention for a few minutes back to the previous day, the day of the sealed tomb. It's a day which is a great challenge in my life. As we open his word, let us claim his sweet promise. Loving God, we praise you that in your wisdom and your care, you give us this sweet promise as we open your word, that you will send your Spirit to open up our eyes to see the wonderful treasures that have been prepared for us, to open up our hearts that we might receive those precious treasures. Amen. As Jesus went about his ministry, it was a time of great excitement for his followers. Spectacular miracles. The attention of the people growing and growing. And yet, oddly enough, for the last year of his ministry, he stayed away from Jerusalem. He kept avoiding all of that public attention. And then the day came when triumphantly he rode into Jerusalem. It was a day of great excitement, a day of great joy for his followers. Oddly enough, although everybody else was filled with joy, Jesus wept. Matthew chapter 26, verse 35. Peter said unto him, Though I should die with thee, yet I will not deny thee. Likewise, also said all of the disciples. They sincerely believed what they had said. And yet, the unthinkable happened. He allowed himself to be taken, to be tried, to be convicted. Unbelievable. Luke chapter 22, verse 61. And the Lord turned and looked upon Peter, and Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said unto him, Before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter went out, and he wept bitterly. Matthew chapter 26, verse 56. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. He was carried out to be crucified. Luke chapter 23, verse 27. And there followed him a great company of people and of women, which also bewailed and lamented him, filled with grief. They saw him executed. they heard him say, "It is finished," and then die. They felt like everything that he was trying to do was now defeated. It was all gone. Everything is lost. They faced that Sabbath, the worst day of their life, a day of defeat, a day of grief, a day of shame. John chapter 20, verse 19. The doors were shut where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews. They were so demoralized, so terrified, so filled with defeat that even the next day, Mark chapter 16, verse 10, and when she went and told them what had been with him, as they mourned and wept, and they, when they heard that he was alive and had been seen of her, believed her not. It was inconceivable to them, incomprehensible to them, that everything that they had lived their lives for 3.5 years, had gone down the drain. Their future was gone. Their hope was gone. Their joy was gone. What a horrible, horrible day for them. And for Jesus, John chapter 19, verse 30, he said, "It is finished," and he bowed his head and he gave up the ghost. And then he rested on the Sabbath day. Finished in success. A completely opposite story. Finished, and then he rested. We think of the resurrection as involving this titanic struggle between Jesus and the evil one, and then the evil one triumphed. But Jesus may have looked at it a little bit differently. John chapter 10, verse 17, he said, "Therefore doth my Father love me, because I lay down my life, that I might take it up again. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down by myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again." That's what he said. Imagine for a moment that brilliant angel streaking down through space from heaven in the middle of that night, Saturday night, calling him. Was it like a loving mother calling upstairs to her child and saying, "Breakfast is ready. It's time to wake up"? When he said, "It is finished," it was finished in victory. Let's take a moment to kind of look at this through the perspective of the great controversy. War broke out in heaven, and the evil one attacked God's holy law. He accused God of acting in his own interests at the expense of his creatures. He claimed to be equal. His government was as good, if not better, than God's government. He was the highest of all created creatures. very subtle, very persuasive. But he filled the courts of heaven with his lies about the nature of God. When the time came that he was thrown out, he may have been thrown out, but his influence was not gone. The lies that he had spread about God had left a wound in heaven. A wound that God wanted to be perfectly healed. Not an easy thing. The unfallen angels grieved at the loss of their dear friends who had fallen. They were left vulnerable. Satan and his angels, in their rebellion against God, cut themselves off from the only source of existence, the only source of life in this universe. God could have simply let them go into oblivion, and they would be gone for eternity. But had he done that, he would have been vulnerable for the accusation that the destruction of the fallen angels was God's choice, not their choice. God's kingdom is based completely based on love. There is no force, there is no coercion in the kingdom of God. That is the method of the evil one. Satan and his angels were allowed to continue temporarily because it was the only way to heal the wounds that they had left behind. For the entire universe to be able to completely see what Satan was up to unmask every deception, to reveal the evil, the ugliness of the kingdom of Satan. He claimed that mercy and justice were not compatible. God's justice would have to destroy his mercy. Disproved totally, eternally, in Jesus' life and in his death. Satan attacked Jesus with all of the power that he was capable of for Jesus' entire life. And Jesus clung perfectly to his Father in perfect obedience and in perfect trust in all things. The whole rest of the universe, in watching this controversy play out, got it. They got it permanently. The injury, the wound in the unfallen community that was left by the evil one was gone forever. Satan's deceptions lost all of their power over the rest of the universe for eternity, except for this little third rock out from a little star in a minor galaxy called this Earth. There remained the human race. Satan had one final deception, one last try, that God's mercy destroys his justice. God's perfect holy does not have to be obeyed. Jesus' life and death fully revealed to the whole universe. His justice did not destroy his mercy, and his mercy validated his justice. He said, "Finished," and he rested. Finished, rested. Does that have a familiar sound to it? Does it? Genesis chapter 2, verse 1. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the hosts of them. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. 3 greatest Sabbaths in the entire history of the human race. The Sabbath of creation, and again God finished creation and he rested. The Sabbath of redemption, and God finished the defeat, or at least the certainty of the defeat of the evil one. The evil one could not possibly succeed. It was done. And he rested. And the Sabbath of restoration, when the entire human race of the saved are united in the new kingdom. Finished, rested for eternity. On that Easter Sabbath day, what did things look like in heaven? On earth, it was his followers. It was the worst day of their life. But what did it look like in the courts of heaven? Our pastor last fall had a series on living above the line. The way in the reality of God, things can look very different than in our own eyes. So that on Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem, when the disciples' hearts were filled with joy, Jesus wept. And on Easter Sabbath, when the disciples were crushed with grief and sadness, what was going on in heaven? Let's look at creation. Job, 38th chapter, 4th verse. Where was thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Redemption, Luke 15th chapter, 10th verse. Likewise I say unto you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner that repents. Now, the work of redemption is finished for all of the millions of sinners that Jesus' work saved. It was party time. Imagine the rejoicing, the singing, the celebration in the courts of heaven. What an unbelievable contrast between the grief and sorrow on earth and the rejoicing in heaven. And that exactly right there is where I get caught. Am I looking at the world through my earthly eyes? Am I weighed down by sorrow, by grief, by sadness, by pain, by suffering? Am I caught in the artful deceptions of the evil one that he's winning and God is losing? Am I falling for that deception? Or do I see what is really going on? I'm reminded of a dear little story from Sabbath school. The king of Syria. Syria was a nation that was directly north of Israel. It had the boundary between Syria and Israel was right there. We're not talking about Assyria, by the way. This is the nation that is way over in Mesopotamia, hundreds of miles east of there where Jonah went. This is Syria. The king decided that he was going to attack Israel and he was going to invade it and he was going to take over. Sort of like Putin in Ukraine, you know? He was going to go in. He set up an ambush and he was ready to attack the army. And Elisha goes to the king and he says, the Syrians are going to ambush you here in this place. And so they sent the messengers out to the army and they evaded the ambush and they did not get ambushed. How do you suppose the Syrians felt about that? They were not happy. The king was furious. He got together his counselors of his top leaders and he said, all right, guys, who's the traitor? Who leaked? And he was looking around and everybody says, it's not me, it's not me, it's not me, it's not me. And then a servant stood up and said, King, there is this prophet in Israel who serves a God who says every word that you whisper in your bedroom to the king of Israel. You cannot keep any secrets from their God. And the king said, oh boy, where does this guy live? We're going to take him out. We're going to get rid of this Elisha guy. He was staying in a city called Dothan in Israel. 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 14. You've heard these words already. Therefore sent he hither horses and chariots and a great host. And they came by night and compassed the city about. And when Elisha's servant was risen early and gone forth, behold, a host compassed the city with both horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, alas, my master, how shall we do? There's this huge army around the whole city. We're hopeless. They've got us. Elisha answered, fear not, for they that be with us are more than they are with them. And the servant, gives Elisha this kind of incredulous look, saying, are you getting too old, sir? Have you looked at what's out there? And Elisha prayed and said, Lord, I pray thee, open his eyes that he may see. And the Lord opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw. And behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire about Elisha. Those that be with us are greater than the hosts of evil. Do not believe the deceptions of the evil one about who's winning and who's losing, because the battle was won. when Jesus said, "It is finished." It was won. For eternity, it was won. Open our eyes that we may see the reality of God's work. Isaiah chapter 54, verse 7. For a small moment I have forsaken thee, but with great mercies will I gather thee. In a little wrath I hid my face from thee for a moment, but with everlasting kindness will I have mercy on thee, saith the Lord my Redeemer. For this is as the waters of Noah came unto me. For as I have sworn that the waters of Noah should no more go over the earth, so I have sworn that I would not be wroth with thee, nor rebuke thee. For the mountains shall depart, and the hills be removed, but my kindness shall not depart from thee, neither shall the covenant of my peace be removed, saith the Lord that has mercy on these. Job chapter 13, verse 15, words that I'm sure you're all familiar with. Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. On the worst day in your life, when you are overcome with fear, with sadness, with grief, he's there. He's with you, and he has triumphed over all the work of the evil one. He calls us to hold his hand, to walk with him. I love the lessons of that quiet Sabbath day. It speaks to my life.